Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're speaking on the topic of pure devotional service. On the first day we spoke about the obstacles and the impurities which are there in performing devotional service. And yesterday we tried to bring out what is the actual standard of pure devotion. And today want to speak about how we can actually practice pure devotional service ourselves as devotees, as sannyasis, particularly as the heads of the society, the leaders of the society, the sannyasis. We have an important role to play in this Krishna consciousness movement. Srila Prabhupada began initiating sannyasis in the beginning of the movement. Very early on, he wanted sannyasis, he wanted them to be the preachers, to lead the devotees in preaching. Reflecting over the situation as it is today and how it was then, it's quite a different situation. The role which sannyasis had then and as it is now, really there's a big difference. We see in Prabhupada's time how the sannyasis would be given some devotees, often they would have a few devotees with them and could go traveling, maybe doing Sankirtan, book distribution. So you had Tamal Krishna Goswami and Vishnu Jan with the Radha Damodar party. And many sannyasis also came and joined them. And they had their fleets of buses and they did a lot of book distribution. And then in India, sannyasis were also engaged in preaching work. And that preaching work was often life membership, going to life members and enrolling them. And Prabhupada certainly encouraged and appreciated the sannyasis for doing that service. At the same time, sannyasis also had to show the highest standard in their sadhana, in their spiritual practice. Today also, we see in India today, although there's not so much going on by way of life membership enrollment, but there's still a lot of preaching going on to life members. We have a big number of life members in the different cities, and sannyasis can also go out and go to their homes and give programs, and inspire these life members to become more committed in their spiritual practice. And we often see like that some of these life members, they can actually become inspired to become devotees and come forward and take initiation and develop a good spiritual practice just through some association, just by their kindness, by opening the doors of their home, having the devotees come to their home and receiving them and serving them. Certainly they get a lot of agyata sukriti, and that qualifies them for more devotional service. So it's an important service. And we see also sannyasis going off to new places, opening up new preaching fields. There's, it's not that our Krishna consciousness movement has gone everywhere. There's still so many more places to be opened up. So many more fields are waiting for devotees to come and to develop them. So much to be done. It takes the inspiration of the devotee to want to do it, to want to go there and do something. Prabhupada saw two young brahmacharis. One was named Paramahansa and one was called Paribrakacharya. And they had been traveling. They came to India, but they'd been traveling in different countries through Europe and Asia on their way to India. And when Prabhupada heard about how they'd been traveling around like that, Prabhupada said they should take sannyas. And the other senior devotees and those men who were already sannyasis, they were surprised. They said, Prabhupada, they haven't been in the movement very long. But Prabhupada said, no. He said, they have the mood, they have the right mood. They want to go here and there. They want to try to introduce Krishna consciousness. He said, they should be encouraged. Let them take sannyas. And because Prabhupada wanted it, it happened. They took sannyas. So like that, Prabhupada saw some spark of interest. He saw that this man is eager to take some risks and to go out and try to distribute Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada wanted to encourage it. He considered this as the sannyasi. This is the mood of the renounced order of life. At the same time, sannyasis also have to do things like their own private study. They need to keep themselves strong in Krishna consciousness. In the early 1970s, I had the opportunity to travel with His Holiness Satsvarupa Das Goswami. And Satsvarupa Das Goswami, he wrote to Prabhupada how that while he was traveling in a bus with a few brahmacharis, he would also he would take time out in the day to go to the library and to read and sometimes write. And Prabhupada said, yes, there's nothing wrong with that. He said, you have to do that. He said, if you don't do that, how will you preach? If you're not doing if you're not doing good sadhana, if you're not doing reading and studying yourself, then what will you preach? So Prabhupada encouraged him to take time off from, being on the streets with the devotees, being out there on the streets and distributing books and doing Harinam Sankirtan. Said, yeah, no harm. You go off to the library for a few hours and do your own personal study. That's all right. So Prabhupada recognized the situation and the need of the individual. Prabhupada writes in the purport, in his one of the purports in his books, he says that for the very empowered devotees, they can write and publish books. So Prabhupada liked to see books being produced, just like at the end of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada has written about how his own spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, was very happy to see books being produced. So when the final volume of the Chaitanya Charitamrita came out, Srila Prabhupada explained that how pleased his own spiritual master was and how much attached he was to seeing books produced. So Prabhupada liked very much if a devotee could produce books, and Prabhupada personally instructed Swarup Damodar Prabhu, before he took sannyas, when he was Swarup Damodar Das Brahmachari, he instructed him to write his book about scientific basis of Krishna consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada had it published by the BBT. So he liked very much the devotees, if they could do some writing work, either producing books or else writing articles. We have our Back to Godhead magazine, and it's very nice if we can also write some article there for the Back to Godhead magazine and contribute to the Back to Godhead magazine. Maybe publish, maybe not. I've written some articles, they never get published. They hate my writing. They always throw it back at me. terrible. They don't like anything I write. But there's no loss. It's the effort, the mental concentration which goes into writing and trying to glorify Krishna. We know that our own Prabhupada told us that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada would simply count how many times the name Krishna appeared on each page. And if the name Krishna was there, print it. That was the main thing. He didn't worry so much about the writing standards or the content, but the main thing was Krishna's name should be there, glorification of Krishna. That was important. So being members of our Krishna, in the Krishna consciousness movement, we're always thinking about our own spiritual situation. We want to advance. We don't think that just because we've already taken sannyas that I must be advanced, but we know we still have a long way to go. We want to progress in our Krishna consciousness. And our advancement in Krishna consciousness is described that it's understood by our faith and our knowledge of scriptures. These two things that one should have. Well, we know the three levels of devotees. There's the Kanista, Madhyama, and Uttama, and they're distinguished on the basis of their conviction or confidence in the teachings and their knowledge of scriptures. That somebody who is Kanista may have weak faith and very less knowledge of scriptures. So he cannot easily defeat arguments because he's on the lower platform, the lowest platform. But still he can be a pure devotee, and he can be very devoted. He can be devoted. He can be considered a pure devotee. No sinful activities. He's chanting the holy name. He just has weak faith and he doesn't know the philosophy very well. And Srila Prabhupada even mentions that someone may be a sannyasi. He may have accepted the renounced order of life, and he may not know very much. And certainly Prabhupada gave sannyas to people they'd only been devotees a short time. What could they know? You know, in a very short time, what can you absorb about the Krishna conscious philosophy? But Prabhupada gave them sannyas. He gave them the chance. And Prabhupada explains that even though one may have taken sannyas prematurely, one should simply progress. He should increase his own knowledge of the philosophy and strengthen his own faith in the teachings. And in this way, one may be Kanista, one can advance to the Madhyam and become also Uttama, go on to the Uttama level. And so one is distinguished as Kanista, Madhyam, Uttama based on that strength, conviction, and knowledge of scriptures. So at the same time, one may be Uttama in terms of knowledge of scriptures and strong faith. He may not have developed a loving relationship with Lord Krishna. Now that's a very important point to be considered. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught us, Prem Punarto Mahan. The goal of life is to develop love for Krishna. Now, we may know a lot of philosophy, we may be able to quote many scriptures and so on, and we may have strong faith, we're very convinced about Krishna consciousness, but we may never have really developed our relationship with Lord Krishna. We've never really thought about developing our love for Krishna and our rasa, our relationship with Krishna. So even though one may be Uttama in terms of knowledge and faith, he may just be a conditioned soul when it comes to his actual Krishna bhakti. So both sides are important. We do want to develop that loving dealing with Krishna, that loving relationship. If we don't have love of Krishna, then our life is not successful. We may be very convinced, and we know the scriptures and so on. So this brings up an interesting point, which we often have to deal with in preaching Krishna consciousness. People may argue with us and they will say, are you people really qualified to be spiritual masters, accepting disciples? People question like that. Do you really think you're qualified to accept disciples? To accept disciples, you should actually know what is your rasa with Krishna. You should be on the highest level of Krishna consciousness. If you're not, then it's very dangerous for your disciples. And we know in the Nectar of Instruction, Rupa Goswami has written about that if you accept Kanista Adhikari for a spiritual master, then you can only advance to that level of Kanista Adhikari. You cannot advance further. So, who would like to counter this? Somebody confronts you with this challenging statement that are your gurus, your present day gurus, are they really qualified to be spiritual masters? Someone would like to give me a response?
Yes, Maharaj, of course. For me, better to speak Russian. I don't know, is it possible to translate for translator my speech? Okay. Idea is, according to the disciple, course disciple in ISKCON, first platform is Srila Prabhupada Ashraya. And after then, we accept Shri Guru Ashraya. And first GBC in Russia, Kirtiraj Prabhu in 1990 gave instruction for all the senior devotees in the USSR. He said, we need to surrender a lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada. And after then, for more deep surrender to Srila Prabhupada, for the more deep understanding of teaching of Srila Prabhupada and more deep connection with Srila Prabhupada, we need to accept Guru. By this reason, my person, Srila Prabhupada, I'm not Ritvik, but it is instruction of our GBC in USSR. And by this reason, our guarantee is Srila Prabhupada, like founder Acharya, like this.
Okay. Yes, this would certainly be pleasing to the Ritvik proponents, are those people who are proclaiming that they're all Prabhupada disciples and that Prabhupada's still giving initiation. And then they would be they'd be quite happy to hear that kind of statement, because it certainly encourages them. It goes a long way with what they're saying. And certainly there's a lot of strength to it too, that we know we have had problems with spiritual masters. We've seen some spiritual masters fall down. We've had disasters in our movement. And that's one of the reasons why we have this kind of situation here in ISKCON. Our movement suffered a lot because of the failures of some of the spiritual masters. And many devotees who had come to the Krishna consciousness movement lost faith in the Krishna consciousness movement and some went to other movements, and some just gave up entirely because they were so disappointed. They lost so much of their faith in the spiritual teacher, which is so important in the path of devotional service, that we have to have faith in the Guru. Therefore, it is certainly, I thought it was a very good move on the part of the GBC that they introduced this disciple course and they encourage everyone you know, that certainly Prabhupada is there and you can take shelter of them. At the same time, you also need a living guru to guide. You have to get initiation from a living person. You don't just take instructions from somebody who is no longer physically present. But certainly the books are the basis of our movement. And Prabhupada gives great importance to the books. Now, recently I was hearing one devotee arguing, because some people say, we shouldn't just read the books, we should read Prabhupada's letters, and we should, consider everything Prabhupada said. But Prabhupada also seemed to indicate that there was another quote where Prabhupada said, don't give attention to my letters. And that these are personal things. My letters are more personal. Everything I wanted to be taught is in my books. And if you go to my letters, then you may go off track, because the letters are written to individuals in particular circumstances, and they may not be particularly applicable to the whole society. So this is one problem, that on one hand, people are promoting this thing. You have to read everything Prabhupada said, every word, every letter. But on the other hand, Prabhupada also warns us to be cautious about this, that he didn't really want us all reading his letters. And his letters were personal to individuals, not to the whole movement. He said everything that he wanted to say to the public is in the books, and we should be guided by the books. So Prabhupada gave great importance to the books, and to put emphasis on other things like Prabhupada's letters and sometimes conversations. It may not be so correct. So we have to be a little cautious on these things. Certainly, we know that present day devotees, we cannot imitate Srila Prabhupada. We cannot pretend that we're on the same level as Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada was not just an ordinary pure devotee, but he's a Mahabhagavat devotee. The Mahabhagavat devotee is understood by his ability to convert others to Krishna consciousness. Through Srila Prabhupada's inspiration, so many people were brought into Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada could go himself to the West and he could inspire so many young people, educated people, to take up Krishna consciousness. We had an interesting case here recently in China, where some lady was beginning a course, and she was having a course, and she wanted one lady to teach elder devotee, because there's quite a few elderly people in this movement. She thought we should have a special class for the elderly people. And she, delegated this work to one elderly woman, that you would be a good one. You teach the older people. You give them the class, the course, Bhakti Shastri. You teach them. So I thought it was a bit strange, because we have Prabhupada going to the West at the age of 70 and 80, and he's preaching, and all of the people are young people. All of the students practically are all young. If you look at the films, the recordings, and you hardly see an old person. And when people would ask, reporters would ask Prabhupada, why is it you have so many young people attracted to you? And Prabhupada said, because that is the time for education. Prabhupada was not surprised at all. He thought this is appropriate, because this is the right time for people to get education when they're young. We could say, well, better late than never. older people coming to Krishna consciousness also, we give them a chance, let them come. But I really wonder, is it proper to separate them and have a separate class for them? Some people don't like that. Some people come to our Krishna consciousness movement, some elderly people, they like to be with young people. They enjoy being with the younger people. They feel life, they feel the energy of the youth. It's encouraging for them to take part. And if you have to tell them you're old, you should just be with the older people, they feel very discouraged. Oh no, I don't, they don't want to take part. That's one situation, one issue which comes up in trying to present Krishna consciousness. So devotees are on these different levels, Kanishta, Madhyam, Uttama. And we want to see all the devotees advancing. We want them all to, even we may be sannyasis, we want to go on. We have to continue to advance more and more. We have to dedicate ourselves more fully in the service of Krishna. So I spoke yesterday about the importance of Sankirtan. That Sankirtan is one program which Srila Prabhupada encouraged in the beginning and was very much taken up by the leaders of the Krishna consciousness movement. And we would go everywhere and chant. People would say, I see you people everywhere. People were saying like that in the 1970s. They say, I see you people everywhere. They actually had that mood that Krishna consciousness was everywhere. They thought there must be millions of us because everywhere they would go, they would see us. Every street corner, every shopping mall, airport, they would run into us all over the place. And people were just amazed. Wow, these people are everywhere. But we can see some changes in our movement today. It's really different today. Nowadays, you go out on Harinam. I had the experience. I went out on Harinam in Bangkok, in Thailand, and somebody came to me and said, where have you been? I haven't seen you guys in years. You know, I don't know. Some places it's just like that. They just haven't seen us. We've just disappeared. It's like we're laying low, hiding ourselves. So one important issue in presenting Krishna consciousness, we want to try to encourage this participation in activities like Harinam, Sankirtan. I think devotees in London have done very well there. There's a few very stalwart devotees who maintained a very regular presence, daily Harinam Sankirtan for many years, going out every day. You don't have to go out for a long time, but just to go out there, to be out there, let people see devotees, very important. And of course, when we go out there, it's important that devotees should be properly attired. The dress is important. Sometimes when I go to places like Russia, sometimes it's difficult there, Well, first of all, it's difficult because the weather is not very convenient for our dress. The dress of wearing a dhoti and kurta, it's not really ideal attire for a very cold, wintry climate. So sometimes devotees go on Harinam and, they're dressed in all kinds of different clothes. We may understand they're not really devotees, but if somebody is a devotee and they are a member of the Krishna consciousness movement, then they do have a responsibility to wear the proper attire. We do encourage devotees, try to wear the devotee dress. Even when they come to temple, sometimes people don't like to wear the devotee dress. We can tell them, you know, you can change at the temple, just bring the dhoti with you, or even leave it at the temple. And when you come to the temple, you can simply change into the dhoti. But it is an important aspect of Krishna consciousness. And it does make a difference to our consciousness, just being dressed as a devotee. It really does help us to think more that I'm representing Krishna. Remember, the ultimate rule and regulation over all other rules and regulations is that we have to remember Krishna. Studying scriptures is good, but sometimes, you know, we can get confused. There are different contradictions, different things mentioned in the scriptures. Which ones are we meant to follow? Which ones are important for us? So the primary rule and regulation is to always remember Krishna and never forget him. So any action which helps us to remember Krishna, then that's very important. That's very basic to our Krishna conscious lifestyle. We really need these things. We want to mold our life in such a way that we can remember Krishna. So wearing the devotee dress, marking the body with tilak, and then also having a shaved head with a shika, that's also nice. One man told me, he said, I can't have a shika. He said, I'm a Chinese. He said, how can I have a shika? He was so much in the bodily concept. So, of course, we say this is the spiritual dress. This is how we dress in the spiritual world. So we try to encourage people to develop a taste for these things, for the dress, for the hairstyle, all of it's very important. Women also, we see a lot of, well, the standards have gone down so much. If you look at the early pictures, you know, Prabhupada in the 1960s with Yamuna and these other ladies, and how they dressed and how their bodies were covered, how they wore their saris, you know, their hair, how it's all tied up and covered. But nowadays, you know, you look at if I get a picture of this, some temple in the West, and I see so many ladies, and none of them got their hair tied up. All got their hair hanging loose over their shoulders. And it's just really not the standards. It's not how it's supposed to be at all. Certainly in Srila Prabhupada's time, wouldn't be like that. And if you look at the other temples, you know, if you look at the standards they have in somewhere like the Shankaracharya Mutt, they're really strict. Any female who wants to come in a room where a Mayavadi sannyasi is, they have to wear a full-length sari. No gopi dress, a full-length sari. And they have to be really covered. Otherwise, they're not allowed even in the room. So we did have standards like that, and Prabhupada did teach the devotees like that. And somehow over the years, in the name of liberation, these things seem to have all been forgotten about. And it's, you know, oh, if it feels good, do it. So we are trying to set an example, and we want to encourage devotees. We do want people to come to Krishna consciousness. Sometimes people say, oh, you make it too strict, nobody will come. Allen Ginsberg said like that to Prabhupada, that, oh yeah, that this is very conservative. But Prabhupada said, conservative? He said, I'm only giving the very minimum standards, the very basic. He said, there's so many more things which could be there. I've just kept it very basic. So these are some considerations. We want to encourage the Krishna conscious devotees, that we want to see the congregation grow. We want to see it develop. There are standards. Standards, maybe these standards are only there for the serious devotees, those who are committed to Krishna consciousness. And other people who come, they're not very much committed. So we can't really control them. We don't have any say over how they dress or what they do. We just have to let them come. But doesn't help in creating the right atmosphere in the temple. Any comments? Anybody have anything to say about this? Any agreements? Any disagreements?
The West. Maharaj, I have a question.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for sharing about how the standards were. So I'd like to know that, especially with the standards regarding dress code, and you mentioned the lady and their dress, would you advise, sannyasis or sannyasi candidates to even speak on such issues in today's climate in ISKCON in the world? When you are
Yeah, we may not be very popular if we do, huh? We're worried about our own popularity. If we're thinking like that, if we refrain from speaking about these things just because we're worried about our own popularity, I don't think that's very good. We shouldn't be concerned about our own popularity. We should simply want to present Prabhupada. But there's a time and place for everything. You have to judge the right time and the proper circumstances when you can present this kind of thing. Ideally, I would think you want to present it to the temple members, those people who are maybe the strong members in the congregation, the leaders of the temple. You want to bring it to their attention and let them know these things and remind them about this and point out what is being followed and what is not being followed. Sometimes, people are so busy managing, they don't notice these things. Sometimes they're just so eager to get people there, they don't care how they come and how they dress. They don't worry about it. They just say, well, there's a crowd here, big crowd. They couldn't care what they're dressed like. I had, one country I preach in is Thailand. Thailand is a Buddhist country, and they have a lot of Buddhist temples there. And the Buddhist temples often get visitors. And because Thailand is a tropical country, so people who come there in Thailand, they don't, they dress in very scant clothing, often shorts. They're not very well covered, you could say. They don't have to be, because it's so hot and tropical. So they dress in clothes which they think are suitable for that kind of climate. So when they go to the temple, because the temple is, Buddhist temple, that the Buddhist temple have a big box of cloth just at the door of the temple. And they put a sign up there and they explain to people that this is a temple and people coming in this temple must cover their bodies. That we don't want you to come in shorts and low-cut things, we don't want you dressed improperly in our temple. So please take some of the cloth provided here and use it to cover your body. And people are quite obliging. You know, they're pious, they come to the temple, they want to see the temple. And so they see the sign there and they will take a piece of cloth and wrap it around themselves. And it's the same, you go to a mosque. I had brought a number of Chinese devotees to Malaysia, and we were touring Malaysia, and somehow the one devotee was leading us. He took the devotees to see the National Mosque, which was there in Kuala Lumpur. It's a very big, beautiful building. So they went to see it. So before they went into the mosque, the people from the mosque came and told them that this is a mosque. Everybody who comes in here, they must put something on their head and they must wrap something around themselves. And they gave the cloth, they gave the hat, they provided the means to cover themselves. And everyone, all of our Chinese people, they all dressed up and they went into the mosque and they saw the mosque very happily. And the people from the mosque were very satisfied that the people had behaved properly and dressed properly. They provided everything to cover the body. Sometimes our temples are not so prepared for that. You get sometimes guests coming, mini skirts, and you have to sit on the floor or something. We have to be prepared to provide suitable covering for people. If we're not going to present to the people themselves to do it, then we should make some arrangements to provide for them. Keep cloth there so that they can be covered. Because it's not very pleasant for a sannyasi to have to sit in front of a bunch of young women who are all improperly dressed. Is that reasonable?
Yes, it's very reasonable, Maharaja. We had that for a university setup where we used to keep chadars for the students because they want to come and sit lotus and then they're improperly dressed, then they can take and cover and everyone is peaceful, the preacher and the guests.
Yes, very good, yeah. Yeah, we have to arrange it ourselves. Often our temples, we don't think about it. We're not so thoughtful, and the people come and we're put into these situations. Prabhupada, of course, had that one reporter came to see him, and she was also in a very short dress, and she was asking about why the men all shave their heads. Very famous conversation. And Prabhupada explained to her, he said, it's better to have warm legs and a cool head. You know, he was in England, so it was very cold. So the woman was wearing a short dress, so her legs would be very cold, but she was still wearing short dress. Prabhupada said, better to have warm legs and cool head. So we want to be prepared for these kind of issues when they come up in our temples.
Maharaj?
Yes?
On the chat, I put a question that what do you think about Krishna West? There are also many sincere devotees. What is your comment? I just want to, because we face them every off and on. Krishna West.
Oh, Krishna West? What about
the
it?
conception of Krishna. Well, they don't promote this devotional dress. They think you have to adapt the place, circumstances. You don't have to be like, they say fanatic of holding the tradition of.
Yes, well, time and circumstances, time, place and circumstances. In certain places, certainly it's going to be successful. that you bring people in the beginning, to get them into Krishna consciousness. You know, the thought of shaving your head and wearing these funny clothes can certainly put a lot of people off. But later on, gradually, people can understand, they can accept it. Once you've cultivated them, once you've developed their faith in the process of Krishna consciousness, then you can present it to them. Gradually, not immediately that, you know, you have to shave up, you have to wear a dhoti, you know. So I think that there's certainly, they certainly seem to have some success in the West. I understand it's very successful now, Krishna West, that there are many people taking an interest. But we should understand it's not exactly what Prabhupada wanted. And Prabhupada wanted us, Prabhupada didn't set these standards. He liked to see the devotees shave their heads. Certainly before initiation, people were told, you have to shave your head. You want to get initiation. Even I was listening Yashomati Nandan Prabhu before, you know, he departed just last week. So there was a recording of his remembrances. And he was telling how when he became a devotee, he'd been working in a job. He was an engineer in Detroit, in motor company. And so he'd become a devotee and he was to get initiation. And they told him, you have to shave your head. You're going to get initiated, you have to shave up. So it was a bit of a jolt, you know, because he's working in a job and wasn't expecting this. But Prabhupada made it very clear. You want to get initiation, you have to shave your head. And so he did it. He shaved up. And what happened was after that, he ended up not going back to the job. He thought, no point going back to the job. I've got this shaved head. How could they ever accept me in my work anymore? Just became full-time devotee. And he went off to India and developed preaching in Gujarat. He did so much service. So that was of course, that was Prabhupada's mercy on him. Krishna West is something else. It's an opportunity to give people who are not so much committed to Krishna consciousness, it gives them a chance to come in and get a little taste of what Krishna consciousness is like. And it can work very well. It's certainly one way in which people can be brought into Krishna consciousness and they can be developed more and more. They can be awakened. How to develop their spiritual life. So Western countries, they're not familiar with this kind of culture. It's different in India, of course. In India, in the East, it's very different. But in the West, in countries like America, then certainly difficult for people to understand what devotees doing, and they think that just some Indian thing. They think the temple's just Indian. They don't understand the actual nature of the Krishna consciousness movement. So somehow or other, get them attached to Krishna, right? That's the principle in preaching. Somehow or other, don't worry about the rules and regulations. The rules and regulations come later. Somehow or other, get them attached to Krishna. So that is how I see the Krishna West movement, that it's an opportunity for people to develop some attachment for Krishna. And gradually, they will come. Naturally, if they were to come to India, to the holy place, Vrindavan, Mayapur, like that, they would also want to dress like devotees. They'd also want to put on tilak and maybe even shave their heads and like that. They will feel, and they'll feel comfortable. Then they can actually really appreciate Krishna consciousness. So like that, we can't be too demanding and trying to present Krishna consciousness to the public. Just somehow or other, get them attached to Krishna. I'm just looking at my
Very well
notes.
put. Thank you, Maharaj. Very well explained.
Yeah.
Possibility is there in your previous question. Maybe you have some plan. I don't want to take too much of your time, but on your previous question, I had one understanding, and I wanted to make sure I can write to you later, or this is what I understood from Prabhupada's books and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. If you want, I can speak about it for a couple minutes, and or later on I can.
Okay, go ahead. Couple of minutes, no problem.
Okay. What I understood from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu of Rupa Goswami Pad, Nectar of Devotion of Prabhupada, that those verses, Kriti Saddha Bhave Saddha Bhavasa Sadhana Vida Nitya Siddhasya Bhavasya Prakritam Ridi Saddhata, that we have Bhava Bhakti, we don't have a prem in a sense the word, but it is a prem. Bhava is also prem, is a premankura, the beginning, that is eternally in the heart. And when we join in a Krishna consciousness movement, and from Nectar of Devotion, we see there is a two-way we get it, by practice and by the mercy. As you were nicely explaining other day, Krishna's mercy and devotee's mercy, yes. So both way we get it. And the point to us that surrendering to Guru's lotus feet is where from Guru's heart, those two potency manifest in the disciple's heart. And there are 9 symptoms, Skanti Abharta Kalattam, those verses explaining the 9 symptoms. So we can examine within our own heart whether those symptoms are actually manifesting or not. That means surrender or the pleasing Guru is not complete yet. It has to be very sincerely, thoughtfully engage our mind and body and word, that those 9 symptoms has to manifest slowly. And this is how the eventually leads to the full fledged of prema.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we have to come through the stage, but some people, they think we can go immediately to spontaneous devotion, raga bhakti, but generally, that's not our principle, that's not our process. Generally, we first come to Vaidhi bhakti, following the rules and regulations. We want that. It's a very rare soul who's immediately can take up spontaneous devotion for the Lord. Or there may be some rare soul, and from spontaneous devotion at Vaidhi Bhakti, then he may go on to Raga Bhakti, to Bhava Bhakti and Prema Bhakti. These are the higher levels of devotional service. But Srila Prabhupada was very clear about what he wanted. Swarup Damodar Maharaj, he was from Manipur, and in Manipur, Rasa Lila is very popular. And he wanted to really meditate on Rasa Lila. Swarup Damodar really wanted to just be absorbed in Krishna and Rasa Lila. And Prabhupada told him, he said, Swarup Damodar was saying to Prabhupada, he said, he said, if I can absorb myself more in Krishna Lila, I can understand my own rasa with Krishna. I want to develop my rasa with Krishna. But Prabhupada's reply to him was, you preach to the scientists and Krishna will reveal your rasa to you. Prabhupada wanted him to do that work. You go and preach to the scientists. Your job is not just to sit and meditate and absorb yourself in Rasa Lila, but preach to the scientists. That and Krishna will reveal your rasa to you. So
that's very nice.
We don't have to worry too much. We don't have to, the important thing is to keep ourselves fully engaged in cultivating Krishna consciousness and pushing on the Krishna consciousness movement. And if we're keeping ourselves in that mood, then naturally we'll be healthy in Krishna consciousness and we will progress. Our remembrance of Krishna will become natural. Tamal Krishna Goswami was working in Bombay, 1970, early 1970s. There were issues with the land, purchasing the land and building the temple at Juhu. And he was saying to Prabhupada, I know the municipal laws better than I know your books, Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, this is your service for Krishna. You have to do this. Of course, these kind of things, so these services like, you know, dealing with the government and preaching, you know, these things, this is not really our Sanatan Dharma, but it's something which has to be done. It's important work. And Prabhupada was concerned. He wanted this, he didn't want these things to be neglected. He didn't encourage us just to sit down and meditate and just chant Hare Krishna. He wanted to see us always active, preaching Krishna consciousness. One devotee came, I think it was Hansadura Prabhu, he came from Germany with some buses. He brought them to India and they were there at Vrindavan. And Prabhupada came to Vrindavan, he saw the buses there. He said, what are these buses doing here? And Hansadura told Prabhupada, he said, Prabhupada, it's Chaturmasya. We're observing Chaturmasya. And Prabhupada said, keep the buses rolling. Get out there and preach, distribute the books. You don't have to sit here and observe Chaturmasya. Better you're out there, traveling and preaching. So this was Srila Prabhupada's mood. He didn't want us just to become, you know, Bhajananandis. He gave the emphasis on Gostavanandi, not Bhajananandis. That wasn't so much. So our mood should be to please Krishna, not just to please our senses. Sometimes we fall into that trap. We're thinking what I want. We're not thinking what Krishna wants. So it's very important for us to also get senior association and to be willing to hear from senior Vaishnavas. So even one's on the Madhyama level, he may have come up from Kanista up to Madhyam level, but still he wants to make advancement. He has to go on. And to do that, to get advancement, what do you need? You need good association. So association, we can associate with Prabhupada's books, that's one thing, listening Prabhupada's lecture, but the living presence of senior devotees is also very important. Coming together with the devotees is very powerful, very purifying for us to be with devotees. And that's why Prabhupada organized festivals like the Gaur Purnima festival. And then at Kartik also, just like Prabhupada, he came to Vrindavan during Kartik and he spoke at Radha Damodar temple, invited devotees to come. So Prabhupada understood devotees always wanted to get his association, and he tried to give himself as much as he could to the devotees. He sacrificed so much just to give his association because he knew how much it was inspiring to the devotees. So what does it mean to be an Uttama Adhikari? Uttama Adhikari doesn't mean that you have to see Krishna everywhere, of course. Sometimes people think like that, you know, are you seeing Krishna everywhere? It's not that we're seeing Krishna. Somebody said to me recently, he said, have you seen Krishna? I said, well, I saw Prabhupada. I did see Prabhupada. They wanted, they want the children, did you see Krishna? No, I saw Prabhupada. Prabhupada is representative of Krishna. So it's not that we have to see Krishna, just like Sukadeva Goswami, Narada Muni, Vyasadeva, they're not seeing Krishna all the time, are they? They didn't see Krishna all the time. Sometimes they saw him, but we always have the desire to see Krishna. That's the point. That is the Uttama Adhikari. Not that he's actually seeing Krishna all the time, but he has the desire to see Krishna. He wants to see Krishna. So in order to keep that desire to want to see Krishna, we have to really dedicate ourselves to Krishna consciousness by hearing, chanting. We have to cultivate our faith and knowledge. These two things are there for to develop our love and attachment for Krishna. So actually, who can be guru? I was talking about that. Who is actually qualified to be the spiritual master? Anybody who is really dedicated to Krishna consciousness. If they've got strong faith and knowledge of the scriptures, then they're not going to fall down. Very unlikely that they will fall down if they're actually very strong in their commitment to Krishna consciousness. But they always have to be trying to improve and trying to progress, not thinking that we're actually perfect, but want to go on. Sometimes people would say, because we're not born Brahmanas, so we cannot be Brahmins. But we don't give importance to birth. We give importance to the spiritual practice, right? Prabhupada would argue like that when people would come to Prabhupada arguing, saying that, why you give these people the Brahmin thread, why you made this person a Goswami, why you did, and Prabhupada would say, because they've dedicated everything to Krishna, because they're 100% engaged in the service of Krishna. They're every day rising early, chanting the holy name, studying Srimad Bhagavatam, preaching and distributing Krishna consciousness, working hard, selflessly. Prabhupada said, what good is birth? Birth is not the important quality. See, people are so much in that bodily concept, they're thinking birth is so important. But the birth is not important at all. Now, we do have some problems. We do get, of course, some devotees who are, well, they're supposed to be devotees, but they do more harm than good to our movement. They don't behave properly. They don't follow the principles. But they claim, yeah, I'm initiated, I'm proper disciple. They don't follow any rules and regulations. So that very damaging for our movement. Prabhupada was concerned like that. He said that, you know, I give you this Brahmin thread, I make you Brahmin, but then you go back to meat eating and intoxication and these other bad habits. Then this is not good. This is very, very bad for our Krishna consciousness movement. So we try to be very careful. Nowadays, in our movement, it's more difficult to get second initiation. We have higher standards before awarding second initiation. We encourage people, they should take Bhakti Shastri first of all, complete the Bhakti Shastri, then you may be taking, then you can take second initiation. I know people like Jayapataka Maharaj and Gopal Krishna Goswami, they have many disciples, but they don't easily give out second initiation. They're very careful. They're very selective on that. So higher standards are there. And just as nowadays we have higher standards even for first initiation, trying to protect the spiritual masters. People come forward, they want initiation, they're very eager to get initiation, and the spiritual master doesn't really know them. And so it's certainly risky to accept them and to give them initiation. We don't know how they're going to perform, what they're actually doing. They don't live in the temple. They may come to the program maybe a couple of hours a week. They come and associate. So you don't know what goes on in the private life. So it's very difficult to know who is actually worthy of initiation. So for these reasons, we have to have higher standards. We have to be more careful. We do want to train devotees. We try to give proper training. Previously, we had bhakta training programs. That was for people living in the temple. Nowadays, people not living in the temple. So it's more difficult to train them. You don't really know just what happens. So certainly we have to be cautious and giving initiation and awarding initiation. And similarly, of course, when it comes to sannyas, very careful nowadays, much more careful. Nowadays, Prabhupada gave sannyas to young men, because everybody was young. Give them a chance. He knew it would be difficult, and certainly it was difficult. Young, we had young men, even gurus. Some gurus were under 30, 28 years old, and you're a guru. And they would give guru puja in the temple room, and was real. So it's not surprising that we had so many problems in the Krishna consciousness movement, because people were very young. Just when Prabhupada gave sannyas to, I think it was 6 people in Mayapur, 1976, and one of Prabhupada's friends was there at the time, and he said to Prabhupada, he said, they're all very young, Swamiji, very young men taking sannyas. And the young means 20s, very early 30s. And so Prabhupada said to him, he said, if they are old men, what can they do? So that was Prabhupada's response to the man's question. In old age, difficult. People get weak, tired. They're not able to work so hard, not able to go for Harinam. They're not able to do a lot. Prabhupada experienced himself. Of course, he went at 70 to America, so he knew all about it. Anyway, our Krishna consciousness movement trying to give everyone an opportunity to take more responsibility. Those people who want to take sannyas, come forward, take up sannyas. Very good, we need sannyasis. Prabhupada wants millions of gurus. Sannyasis are naturally the gurus, the spiritual masters. And Prabhupada said we need millions of gurus to go up, because there's so many conditioned souls. We have to go everywhere and preach to them. Everyone has to become a guru, right? Especially the sannyasis. So that's very important. Now we're practicing devotional service, Vaidhi Bhakti, according to rules and regulations. Of course, we want to advance. We want to also go on. We should experience the higher stages of devotion, come to bhava, and as you say, go on to prema. Bhava, of course, is difficult to come. It's very difficult. It's a devotional service is rare because Krishna is reluctant to give that kind of ecstasy. And the other reason is because you get it only by our own effort. So bhava is not very easily attained. But as you mentioned, there are 9 principles, 9 practices, items there, which identify someone on the level of bhava, their activities, how one is fully engaged in their chanting and the preaching work. So great emphasis is put on these 2 activities, chanting the holy name and preaching with pure devotees. Then this is a very powerful means to come to spiritual perfection. So in our Krishna consciousness movement, we, as sannyasis, this is our main focus, preaching and chanting the holy name. It may be japa. We have a lot of japa workshops, maybe sankirtan. Join the sankirtan. Or it may simply be preaching, giving seminars. Tamal Krishna Goswami mentioned to Subhak Swami, he told him, he said, Subhak Swami is a sannyasi. Your job is you should give seminars, you should give classes to the devotees, make some nice seminar presentation to them. And sometimes you can write some articles also. This is the business of sannyasi. We want to inspire the devotees. We want the devotees to be strict in their practice. We have to show them the example. We're following regulative principle. We want them to follow regulative principles. 2 items, 2 reasons. They should have faith in the scriptures and they should be afraid of sinful reactions as well. In this way, they can be encouraged to come to the platform Vaidhi Bhakti. So help us to remember Krishna, Sanatana Goswami wrote Hari Bhakti Vilas. And from Hari Bhakti Vilas, Rupa Goswami wrote his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It said the 64 items of devotional service which are listed in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu were taken from Hari Bhakti Vilas of Sanatana Goswami. But in another place, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that actually these 64 items which Rupa Goswami listed, they're there in Krishna's teaching to Uddhava in the 11th canto, Uddhava Gita. So 64 items were there, how to practice devotional service, how to engage the body, mind, and senses in the service of Krishna. And from these 64, 10 of them were, the first 10, they're things we must do, Anako Yasya Sankalpa, and the next 10, Pratiko Yasya Varjanam. What must be done, what must be given up, what must be accepted, what should be rejected. So then there's there's 20, and then there's another 39, and then there's 5 special items, 5 special items which we call Panch Anga Bhakti. Rupa Goswami talked about this Panch Anga Bhakti. Sadhu Sangha, Nam Kirtan, Bhagavata Shravan, Madhav, what is it? worshipping
Mathura Vasa.
Mathura Vas,
Mathura Vasa.
Mathura Vas, Srimurtaya, Shradaya, Sevana. All right. So the 5 kinds of devotional service, which are particularly potent, and Rupa Goswami saw little attachment to any one of these 5, then this can really help us to get that mood of spontaneous devotion, to come to this raga bhakti. And Prabhupada, of course, put these items in our morning program. So the morning, evening programs in the temple, they help us to come to, if we just simply follow these programs, naturally we'll come to the level of spontaneous devotion. Spontaneous devotion is not that we're afraid, but naturally loving desire that we want to come, we want to be there, we want to take part in the program. We want to see the deities, we want to chant, we want to worship Tulsi, we want to offer a bit of flower to Prabhupada, and we want to sit and hear Srimad Bhagavatam. All of these activities, so important for our Bhakti Lata beach, to nourish our creeper of devotion. So particularly Sadhu Sangha, Nam Kirtan, Bhagavata, Shravan, these 3 are very, very important. And from these 3, particularly important is this Nam Kirtan. That Nam Kirtan is the most powerful of these 5 items. The chanting of the holy name of the Lord. That is very, very crucial for our progress in Krishna consciousness. If we do the Nam Kirtan properly within the chanting of the holy name, then there is also Shravanam and there is also Smaranam. It's all there in the chanting of the holy name. So we do want to encourage the devotees. We want to inspire the devotees. The sannyasis have that job, to lead the devotees, to encourage them in the chanting of the holy name, to be there at the morning program regularly, every day. Just like Prabhupada, one time Prabhupada was going to give class in Los Angeles, Rameshwara, who was in charge at that time, he said, Prabhupada, you're not well. He said, Prabhupada, you're not well. You don't need to give class. Let one of us give class. And Prabhupada said to him, he said, if I don't give class when I'm not well, you will think it's all right for you not to give class when you are not well. So Prabhupada wanted to make it very clear that he didn't think that, just because you're not well, you shouldn't go to the morning program or you should miss the class. But at the same time, nowadays we got this COVID virus. I don't know how Prabhupada would, we got so many rules. Don't get too close to each other, stand on the cross, keep a distance, social distancing, and a very special situation. But the main point is the importance of chanting of the holy name and encouraging the devotees in their japa, encouraging the devotees in kirtan. And now, of course, today, very auspicious, we're beginning the month of Kartik. It's a very auspicious time for all the devotees. We want to encourage all of them in their chanting. Of course, for us, for ordinary devotees, it's just another month. Because every day, every month, we're doing chanting, we're doing our devotion. But special time, the month of Kartik, we do want to try and make special efforts to try to encourage and inspire people more in Krishna consciousness. Any question?
Махарадж, у меня вопрос. Я бы хотел попросить сначала преданных с России перевести.
I will be translating this question. Харе Кришна, Вальмики Прабhu.
Спасибо вам огромное, Махарадж, за нектар.
Thank you very much for your nectar, Maharaj.
бы хотел вернуться к теме проповеди для лидеров и совместить это с тем, что мы можем одеваться, когда ну, в одежды вайшнавские или саньясы, уже одежды, те, кто уже принял саньясу, и идти прям непосредственно туда, в администрации там, городов, и там проповедовать, там проповедь вести, насколько это ну, опасно или не
То есть
рекомендуется.
можно ли туда идти в вайшнавской одежде?
Ну, в вайшнавской именно и в одежде саньяси, то есть это для кандидатов. То есть не опасно ли это общаться с лидерами, например, без почитания, он не соприкасался там с царями, да, и так далее.
Ага,
Что они ну,
хорошо.
полны, в общем.
Regarding the training which should be given to the leaders of our society, will it be proper if our leaders, for sake of preaching, will go to city administrations in Vaishnava dress or in sannyasa dress when one already is awarded sannyas?
Yes,
Да,
I think it's proper. Prabhupada always went in his
да, я
sannyasi dress.
считаю, что это правильно. Шрила Прабхупада всегда и везде ходил в одежде саньяси.
One of the things which really confuses people, which I found anyway in some Buddhist countries, preaching in some, like I said, Thailand and also Taiwan, they're both Buddhist countries. And one thing which really confuses the people, the local people, is when they see a devotee change their dress. But one minute they see him, one day they see him in the dress as a monk, and the next day they see him some other dress in ordinary clothes. They become very confused. It's something which they're not familiar with at all. That how this person, he's a monk one day, and the next day he's not a monk, and then the next day he's a monk again. And, you know, they see the devotee back and forth, changing his dress, and they wonder, what kind of person is this? So particularly sannyasis, they're expected to wear the sannyasi robes. And I remember also in 1977, there was a historic case in New York. There was a case where the temple president, Adikeshava Prabhu, Adikeshava Swami at the time, he was charged with brainwashing. Somebody had become a devotee, and somehow they'd made a case against Adikeshava Swami, who was like regional secretary or GBC, and then there's also the temple president of the New York Center. They were both charged with brainwashing, and they had a case. And Adikeshava Prabhu went to see Prabhupada to get guidance on this, and he asked Prabhupada. He said because the press is very insulting and very negative about us. They say that we're very weird, that we have this weird hairstyle and strange looking clothes, and we're like people from another planet, we're like zombies. And so he said, I thought it would be good if I grow my hair and wear ordinary dress, and then when we go to court, I can appear normal. But Prabhupada said, oh, no, not at all. He said, that's not what we want to do. He said, I want you to keep shaved head and dhoti and go as a sannyasi. And you go, don't hide. We don't want to compromise. We don't want to try to present ourselves as something else. Be truthful. Let them see us how we are. And amazingly enough, the whole case was over in one day, and we won without any shadow of a doubt. The judge threw the case out of the court and said, this is not there's no question of any crime, that these people have joined this Krishna consciousness movement. The First Amendment in the USA is people have freedom to take up any path of religion they choose. And this is a bona fide religious tradition, and there's no case at all. And he threw the case out of the court. So in one day, the devotees won. And, Prabhupada was so pleased. It was a wonderful victory for the Krishna consciousness movement. And Prabhupada, it was a big case. It was going on for, before it went to court. There was so much publicity, Hare Krishnas, brainwashing, and Prabhupada said, take my books there. He said, you take all the books there. And he said, and tell the judge he has to read all these books. Let him know what is our philosophy. And so Prabhupada didn't want to compromise, didn't want to change anything. That was Prabhupada's mood. We can't deny that. Krishna West, that's another thing. That's specialized preaching. You want to preach to Westerners, but ultimately you got to come back to what is the Krishna consciousness movement and how Prabhupada set it up. You're going to worship deities. You're going to worship deities. You can't do it in your jeans with long hair. That's not very good. So those are some considerations. And Prabhupada, when Siddhar Swarup left Krishna consciousness, Siddhar Swarup, he, from Hawaii, he's also known as Chris Butler. So he had been initiated as a sannyasi, and he was in the Krishna consciousness movement, but he had some difficulties to work along with the devotees in Krishna consciousness. So he decided he wanted to leave Krishna consciousness and do his preaching independently. And Prabhupada approved it. He said, all right, you can do that. But he said, don't give up your sannyas. He said, you've taken sannyas. He said, keep your sannyas vows, keep your shaved head, and wear sannyasi robes, do your preaching. He said, all right, you want to be independent. You cannot work with the devotees, these leaders here in the GBC leaders, then you can go independently. But he didn't want them to give up his sannyas. Keep your vows of sannyas. That was important. But of course, he didn't do it. It was maybe too difficult for him once he went out of Krishna consciousness, found it very difficult to be alone, being sannyasi. But some people have done it. We see people like Tripurari and Jagat Guru Swami. Later on, he was reinitiated by Sridhar Swami. He got the name, I think, BVV Nrisingha. So he also, they kept their vows as sannyasis, although they went out of ISKCON. They continued their preaching. So sannyasa is a commitment. It's a serious commitment, lifetime commitment. To dedicate ourselves completely to the service of Krishna. We take sannyas for the service of Krishna, not for the service of our senses, but for the service of Krishna. To give everything, to utilize everything in the service of Krishna. So it's a very, very noble gesture to do that. And Prabhupada appreciated young men wanting to dedicate themselves to the Krishna consciousness movement, to give everything for Krishna. Okay, any other questions? I don't really have much else to add. we do encourage all of you to continue with your preaching work as much as possible, to be bold, to go forward. Prabhupada wanted very much the devotees to be bold in their preaching. I was telling you, think big. Prabhupada said, I can't think small. I want to do something big for Krishna.
Maharaj, can I ask a question? Yes,
Yes, please, Prabhu.
My question has to do with accepting sannyas from a non-diksha guru. What is the understanding behind that, and what does it entail to then accept sannyas not from your diksha guru if they've disappeared?
Oh, because they've disappeared, you mean?
Yes.
Well, you see, accepting sannyas, traditionally, the person who initiates you in sannyas, you're not going to worship him. It's not like you have to worship this person because he gives you sannyas. You still keep your diksha guru. The sannyas, the person who's initiating you as a sannyas, he's just doing an initiation ceremony, but it's just a ceremony. He's not taking any responsibility over you or anything, any commitment like that. But traditionally, to take sannyas, you have to take sannyas from someone who's already a sannyasi. But it doesn't mean you have to worship him. You're just taking sannyas from him. So he's just bringing you into the sannyas ashram. Because he's in the sannyas order, he can bring someone else in to the sannyas order. But you don't worship him. You don't have that kind of relationship with him.
Thank you.
You still have your original diksha guru.
Махарадж, а можно задать еще один вопрос относительно проповеди лидерам общества?
Valmiki Prabhu is asking, is it possible to ask one more question regarding how to preach to the leaders of our society?
The leaders of our society. Now, society means in ISKCON or outside of ISKCON?
Вы имеете в виду тех, кто в ISKCON лидеры, или те, которые за пределами ISKCON?
За пределами лидерами общества, социального общества, мирского.
Those who are leaders of society, not ISKCON society, just mundane society, secular society.
Well, of course, that's very specialized preaching work. You have to have some special strategy in approaching these kind of people. You have to be able to attract them and to interest them. For example, if you try to approach some politician, then politicians want to see that you have a lot of votes and that you're very popular and you have a lot of people. Then politicians are interested, because politicians are looking to get the support. They want popularity and they want votes. Just like I saw the Prime Minister of England, he came to visit the Swami Narayan temple there in London, and they had a huge temple and the temple was packed. So he's very eager to come because he knows these people are all British citizens and they're voting in the election. So he's happy to get some, people to get the votes. If he comes to the temple, people will like him, they'll appreciate him. And so these people who are the leaders of society, they're thinking what's going to benefit them. You want to attract them, you want to preach to them, you've got to show them that you can give them something which can benefit them. Otherwise, it's unlikely that they'll be interested. Prabhupada was eager to meet with the leaders of society. And we did try different times to bring different people for Prabhupada to meet. Important people, sometimes important government leaders, sometimes writers, statesmen. But that was because Prabhupada was there. Prabhupada could speak to them, and they could appreciate this elderly gentleman. He's the head of the society, an important person. So you're going to preach to important people. You have to create a nice atmosphere to receive them and make them feel important, make them feel that they're being properly respected and properly honored. That's very important. If you want to get them to come at all, you've got to have the nice arrangements and do everything in a very, very high standard to make it appear worthwhile for them. Then you have to think also what do you want to get from them? You just want to talk to them? You just want to make friends with them? They will be cautious about making friends with us because they're also thinking, what can they get from us? They come to meet us. You have to think, what can we offer to them? How can we help him? It's not an easy task to meet the leaders of the society, to meet the world. Very specialized preaching. You have to try to find some common topic which they're actually interested in. If you can find out something which they're really concerned about, and then maybe you can make a meeting with them and discuss it with them. There has to be something there in common which you can focus on, which they will be to discuss with you. But it's very important preaching and very difficult preaching to do. Sometimes you need connections, just like Radhanath Swami was able to go into the House of Commons and present his book, Journey Home, and talk about it. But it was done with the help of some politicians. We had some politicians there, some Hindu politicians, some Hindus who come to the temple and who are friendly with the temple and who are in the House of Parliament. So they could arrange it, they could help to get the connection so that Radhanath Swami could go in there and talk. You need people like that. You want to meet the king? If you know the king's secretary, then it's a lot easier. If you don't have any connections, then it's very difficult. So you have to have the right connections. You have to be able to get some connections with these kind of people in order to meet the top people. It's not so much what you know, it's who you know. Who you know, very important. So if you know some important people, then they can connect you to other important people. So you have to think like that. You have to think, who do we know? Have we got any important people who can help to introduce us to leaders of this society? If we're a very small minority, if we're a very small group, then it will be very difficult. It will be very rare. Because we're just a few people. So they won't be so much impressed. But if you have a lot of people, then maybe you can do something. Just like in England, they have a lot of people. They have quite a big community of Hindus there. So they have a lot of people, so they get a lot of support. And it attracts the government leaders. it attracts important people. So they're all thinking, we're thinking, what can we get? They're also thinking, what can they get? Can we benefit them? I was in the Philippines in 1980s, and Tamal Krishna Goswami came there, and they arranged a meeting. Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj met with the president of the country at that time, a man called Fidel Marcos, and he was the ruler of the Philippines. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj met with him, and they talked about, he could talk about Krishna consciousness and so on. And later on, I saw that this man Marcos is a very expert politician. He took pictures of him with Tamal Krishna Goswami, and then he had pictures of him with many other religious leaders. And he showed himself with many different religious leaders from all over the country, and how he was meeting with all these different religious leaders. And so, politicians are very intelligent people. They think how they can benefit, how they can utilize every situation to their own advantage. So we're also thinking, how can we, can we attract people? Can we impress them? Can we get their support? We would like to get their support. It's not easy thing. In India, people come. It's easier, of course, because this is the main religion of the country. And sometimes they will come and Prabhupada will ask the politician and say, please support our movement. Sometimes Prabhupada will ask, please give visas for my foreign devotees so they can stay in India. Sometimes he would ask for land. And sometimes he'll ask, how much can you give something? We're doing a project here. We want to build a temple. Can your government help? Can you provide some support? Has to be some purpose. Otherwise, what's the point? Sometimes meet some famous movie star, politicians, some sportsmen. Try to get them interested in Krishna consciousness. If we get them interested, then they can bring their supporters also. We know some movie stars in Bollywood, they can attract huge crowds of people. When Bhakti Charuswami opened the Ujjain temple, he had one famous movie Bollywood actress come. What was her name? Something, Sheila Banerjee?
Hema Malini.
Mukherjee.
Rani Mukherjee.
Huh?
Rani Mukherjee.
Rani Mukherjee, was it? Okay, Rani Mukherjee, right. Yeah, she was very famous at that time. And, because she came to open the Ujjain temple, big crowd of people came. So many young men, they all came, they all wanted to see this Rani Mukherjee. Yeah. So this is one way, you get a big name, you get big people, they attract more people. You have to know them. Bhakti Charuswami, he had met her. He had some disciple who was related to her, and it was arranged that she would come for the opening of the temple. So like that, you need connections. It's not easy to do. But good luck. It's good. Think big. Yeah, if you can get these people to come into Krishna consciousness, very nice, very impressive. All right. So,
Спасибо, Махарадж. Хари Кришна, поклоны примите, пожалуйста.
Thank
Очень
you very
вдохновляет.
much. Please accept my obeisances.
Possible. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, Hare Krishna. So I think I'll finish here. I have another class pending. I have to go. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak something, my realizations about the Sannyasa Ashram in relation to pure devotional service. So wish you all good luck in your preaching work.
Thank you, Maharaj.
May Srila Prabhupada bestow his blessing on all of you.
Thank
So
you.
we thank you also, Maharaj, on behalf of the whole ISKCON Sannyasa ministry. Thank you for 3 days.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.
And sharing your wonderful realizations and answering all the questions. Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare
Avinash Maharaj ki jai. Hare
I would like to thank all the participants for being with us, giving their valuable time and being active participants in this. I would like other devotees also to take part in the question answer sessions so that the speaker feels more enthusiastic in answering. He feels that everyone is participating in this. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Did anyone find the Google link working for the PPT? I found it wasn't working.
Yeah, there is some problem with the link actually. We will share the new link with all of you again.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.